Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started this morning. I would like to welcome everyone. Uh, this is Heather Schneck with the Women's Resource Center, and we are hosting this presentation this morning talking about the impact of COVID-19, discussing Families First Coronavirus Response Act, unemployment, and more. We do have our presenter, Mr. Bradley Hunt. He's an attorney at law with Brinkley Walser Stoner. And I will let him take over here in just a second to introduce himself. They do have offices in Greensboro and Lexington. And we've got some good information this morning. I know there's been a lot of questions that have already been sent that Mr. Hunt will discuss, but there will be an opportunity to put some additional questions in the Q&A box, and we will try to get to as many of those as possible. So I won't take up further time. I'd like to introduce Mr. Bradley Hunt. Good morning.
Good morning, and thanks for having me and extending this opportunity to talk about some issues related to COVID-19 that we think individuals may need to know going forward in these certainly unsettling and unanticipated times. You know, as I said earlier, I don't know if everybody heard, there is no quote-unquote video associated with this presentation, which you probably want to be thankful for, because all you would be looking at is my face and my messy office. So I will do the best I can with the technology that we have to walk you through these issues, as well as attempt to answer any questions that we may have as we go through the issues. You know, I will say this, you know, we're going to be talking about issues that are related to both federal and state law. This is going to be what I would call a high-level overview of these issues, keeping in mind that Congress and Governor Roy Cooper, you know, Congress either passed, you know, these bills, these laws, or Governor Cooper issued executive orders rather quickly, without what I would call, you know, a whole lot or extensive study of the laws that are passed or the executive order, simply because they needed to during the pandemic. I mean, for example, one of the things we'll talk about is the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. That was drafted, I'm sure, in a matter of days, and it's 800 and some pages. So, as I said, I'm going to try to give you a high-level overview of some important issues. So let's start making our way through the PowerPoint presentation. I'm not sure if I know how to move a slide. I don't know if somebody can tell me that.
You should have a box that gives you control of the screen. Are you seeing that?
I have the screen.
Do you see a box maybe up toward the top?
It says you can control, view options. I'm trying to figure out if I can.
Okay. Why don't I just advance it then?
Okay. Thank you. So that's what I would somewhat look like if I had a camera in my office, but I don't. So we'll move over to the, maybe skip 2 slides to the first meaningful slide. There it is, on whether or not you've lost your job and whether or not you can file for unemployment. This is largely driven down by the executive order that Governor Cooper issued some time ago and continues to issue executive orders that are related to an individual's ability to file for unemployment. The best way to get started in filing for unemployment is online, which you see there's the website information on that slide where you can file. Obviously, they are being inundated with new filings as a result of the coronavirus. I know I have spoken to or heard from at least a few individuals who have said that it is very difficult to get through due to the high volume, that they are having significant delays in getting logged on, and certainly the state is aware of that. I've certainly heard stories or read where folks have tried to file a claim and it takes them a week to actually get linked up and submit their claim, which then begs the question, you know, did I just lose a week of unemployment benefits because it took me a week to get my claim registered? And as I said, the state is aware of those delays, and you will not be penalized for that delay. So in other words, your benefits, assuming you qualify for unemployment, will in fact start at the time you became unemployed. There will not be a delay simply because you were delayed in getting your claim filed in the system. The big changes associated with unemployment benefits, in my opinion, as a result of the executive order is typically under normal circumstances when filing for unemployment, there's usually a week holdback, meaning you're not paid for that first week of unemployment. That is no longer the case related to coronavirus. So in the event you feel like you need to file for unemployment, you would check the reason, coronavirus. There will be no 1 week holdback. Additionally, the executive order waived the requirement that you continue to search for new employment while you are drawing unemployment. That has been waived, so you will not be required to go out and look for jobs while drawing unemployment pursuant to coronavirus. Also, as this indicates, gig workers are covered, meaning seasonal workers who typically might not qualify for unemployment under normal situations can now file for unemployment. There was something else that I was going to address on that was not on the slide, but it'll come back to me. And one of the questions I know that was presented prior to the presentation was, well, if I file for unemployment, I qualify for unemployment, when might I expect my first check, and how will that be received? Is that direct deposit, paper check, or what? So if you qualify, once you qualify for unemployment benefits, you can anticipate receiving benefits in approximately 2 weeks. The reason being, there's still a requirement in the law where some paperwork or verification has to be sent to a prior employer for verification, and that employer has, I believe it's 10 calendar days to respond. So that is still going to occur, and that is why your benefits, you will not see your benefits for approximately 2 weeks. As far as how those benefits are received, I still believe it's one of 2 ways. It's either a direct deposit into your bank account, or you could elect a debit card, meaning that once you qualify, the Employment Security Commission mails you a debit card, and then they upload your benefits onto that card, I believe, on a weekly basis. Let's go to next slide. Typically, those that are self-employed, a sole proprietorship, you work for yourself, you're paid by a 1099, things of those nature. Those folks are typically not entitled to draw entitled to draw unemployment unless they have been paying in to the unemployment system, and that's typically not the case. However, due to COVID-19, Governor Cooper issued an executive order that will allow these folks who are self-employed or paid by 1099 to be eligible for unemployment benefits. There will be some additional documents or verification that will probably need to be provided. You will need to provide proof that you operated your business. You may have to provide your 1099s to provide proof of your income. I don't know the exact date when that executive order was issued. It was issued within probably the last week or so. It is my understanding, at least as of yesterday, that these folks, when we talk about the self-employed, the 1099s, they will start processing those claims as early as tomorrow, Friday the 24th. So if anybody is on here who thinks this may apply to them, you probably should not call today, because like I said, it's my understanding, or you should not try to register today, as it's my understanding that those claims are not going to be eligible for processing until sometime tomorrow. We can move over to next slide. This is, and I won't spend a whole lot of time on this slide, but it gives you an idea of what your unemployment benefits, your payments might be, how long they will last, and how they are calculated. As it says, if you earn tips or commissions, be ready to document your income. You know, I'll say this, and then maybe what we'll do is we'll move on to our next topic, and at the end we'll get questions and see if I can answer them. But I think how I would conclude this talk on unemployment, if you think you may be eligible for unemployment, then you need to file, register, and try to claim unemployment. The rules have been so relaxed as a result of COVID-19 that I guess my takeaway from everything I'm reading and seeing is nearly anybody and everybody who is out of a job, whether it be a waitress, someone who is self-employed, etc., part-time workers, whatever the case may be, you are probably going to be eligible for unemployment benefits. That's the spirit that I'm seeing here. That they're going to make it as easy as possible, if you can get through in the system and get registered, to qualify for unemployment benefits. All right, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so this is entitled Paid Leave. All right, this is in response to the federal law that was passed, the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. There's two areas under that law that I think merits a discussion, and this first issue is emergency paid sick leave under the federal law, and who might be entitled to that. So, and what those benefits may look like. So, as you can see on this screen, we have listed 6 criteria for people who may be entitled to emergency paid sick leave under the Act. As you can see in the upper right-hand corner, this is effective April 1 through December 31, meaning that this is a limited window for employees to be able to claim this emergency paid sick leave. After December 31 of this year, it sunsets, meaning it goes away, and absent Congress extending that deadline, there will be no entitlement to this paid sick leave beyond December 31 of 2020. And these are the 6 reasons, and the only 6 reasons why one would be able to qualify for emergency paid sick leave. You will have to satisfy one of these 6 reasons. Let's move on to the next slide. This gives you a little more detail as to how much you can be paid under this paid leave. As you can see, it's capped at 80 hours, okay? And this leave, keep in mind, is above and beyond anything that the employer already provides to their employees. And so this is, as it says on 5, this is an entitlement for employees. This is not optional. This is not really something that is in the discretion of the employer to grant. The employee qualifies, the employee gets this emergency paid sick leave. So look at number 2. It talks about wages and what you would be paid. If you are subject to a quarantine or isolation order, that's number 1, or a healthcare provider has advised you to self-quarantine, that's reason number 2, or you're experiencing symptoms of COVID-19 and seeking a diagnosis, then you will get your full pay for those 80 hours. If you are caring for other individuals subject to a quarantine or isolation order, or caring for a child whose school or place of child care has closed, or you're simply experiencing other substantially similar conditions to COVID-19, the pay is reduced slightly to just 2/3. Okay, and then it shows you your maximum wages for reasons 1 through 3 if you're receiving full pay, and then it shows your maximum if you're only receiving 2/3 pay. Okay, so we'll keep that slide up. And let me add just a few comments before we move on. So this paid federal sick leave and what we'll call federal emergency FMLA leave, which I'll get to here in a second, is available only to those parents or guardians who need to care for their own child due to school closure or the shutdown of a fee-based child care facility. So what does that mean, and why do I think that's important? Well, the Department of Labor, the United States Department of Labor, has issued guidance around this law and this leave entitlement. And one of the things that they are saying is, certainly with child care, not necessarily schools, but if prior to COVID-19 you did not utilize paid child care, then you would not qualify for this leave. Then that begs the question of, well, I don't send my child to an actual child care facility, a preschool, a daycare, whatever we want to call it, but my mother, the child's grandmother, keeps the child so many days a week in her home, and I pay my mother, the child's grandmother, to keep the child. Well, if you are in fact routinely and consistently paying even a family member for child care, then you would qualify for that leave. But the key is it has to be paid child care. If an employee did not use paid child care prior to the passing of this law, you're not going to be able to claim it now. And that's going to be the same for the emergency FMLA expansion that we're going to talk about, I believe, next. Yes, next slide. All right, so within the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, they also, Congress also gave an expansion of FMLA. Once again, this is a limited window from April 1 until December 31 of this year, and then it goes away. This applies to those employed the past 30 days. Typically under FMLA, you've got to have been employed longer than that. But under this emergency FMLA expansion, they have reduced that work requirement to have been employed for the past 30 days. Understand that this grants an employee an additional 10 weeks of pay, okay? And it'll be partial pay, but it's an additional 10 weeks of pay if you are unable to telework because you need to care for a child because of COVID-19. Now, once again, this goes back to, now, if you're caring for a child whose schools are closed, which to my knowledge all of them are, then you're probably going to qualify for this leave. However, going back to what I said a little while ago, if it's a child care facility related need, you're only going to qualify if you were using paid child care prior to the passage of this law. Also, what you have to remember is this does not increase your overall entitlement to the weeks you're entitled to under FMLA. FMLA gives you 12 weeks in a year, 12 weeks of leave in a year. This does not expand that 12 weeks, okay? So let's say in January, an employee went out for surgery, took FMLA for 4 weeks. Now they would qualify for this emergency paid FMLA expansion. That does not mean they get an additional 12 weeks. They have already used 4 weeks of their FMLA, and now this would be reduced down to eight weeks. So I think that's important that folks need to understand. This does not expand that 12-week entitlement. A couple things that I'm going to add that are not on this slide, and once again, this is information, guidance that has come from the United States Department of Labor. The statute basically says that people are eligible if they have to be home for care for a child who is under 18 years old because the child school or child care provider is closed due to COVID-19. However, the Department of Labor and its regulations said the law can also cover children who are over 18 but have a physical or mental disability that requires care that isn't available because of COVID-19. So that's a little bit of an expansion where if you have a child that's over 18 that is special needs, then you could still likely qualify. However, on the flip side, let me get back to my notes. And this actually relates back to the original paid leave. This is not the expanded FMLA, where it talks about caring for others, caring for individuals subject to a quarantine, isolation, or experiencing symptoms. That sometimes then begs the question, well, my neighbor is sick, and I'm caring for my neighbor, and therefore I cannot work. Am I entitled to leave? Basically, the answer to that is probably going to be no, because it does say, while the law itself says that workers can qualify for sick leave to take care of an individual who is affected by COVID, the Department of Labor issued a regulation that says that they pull that back to just a family member or someone residing in the same household or someone else with that level of personal relationship, so that there would be an expectation that the employee would care for that individual. So that's going to mean a family member, a parent, a grandparent, you're going to have to be able to show that personal relationship to qualify. Also, keep in mind this would not apply, and the emergency FMLA expansion would not apply, and it's on the slide, if you're able to telework or work from home. Okay, so if you're able to perform your job at home, even while caring for your child or caring for someone else, you're not going to be eligible. Okay. Well, let's go to the next slide. Once again, that, and we won't spend a whole lot of time on that slide, but that addresses your 12 weeks of pay. The first 2 are unpaid, but you might be able to take advantage of the 80 hours under the emergency paid leave. But your first 2 under your emergency or expanded FMLA is unpaid. You could take any time off benefits that you've already accrued with your employer, but under this law, the first 2 can be unpaid, and it's paid at 2/3 your normal pay. And then you've got your maximum benefits set to the side. One question, and this is not on here, or a situation that has come up, is employees who have been, let's say, furloughed. Their employer has determined that work is slow or work is going to slow down. You are going to go home. You're going to take an unpaid leave of absence. You're not to come in. There's no work for you to do. The question becomes, well, does that mean I'm entitled to either one of these paid benefits under the Coronavirus Response Act? And the answer to that is basically no. It says workers won't be able to avail themselves to any of the leave options during any period where their employers are closed, whether for lack of business or because of an order by public officials. The thought being, you're not entitled to paid leave if you're not actually taking leave from work to be performed. So if the business is closed, or they've said for you to go home, you're furloughed, you're not entitled to these leave options. But going back to what we talked about earlier, you most likely would be entitled to qualify for unemployment. So no federal leave there, but you should seek unemployment. All right, next slide. So we've covered unemployment. We've covered the leave options that might be available, and I'll touch on this ever so slightly. You know, if you own a business and the questions are, how might these leave policies impact me, or you know, what's out there to help me, you might want to get with me after the presentation. Send me an email, and I can look into that issue in greater detail. But there will be some tax credits available for businesses for providing this paid leave. If you own a small business and you could actually you could exempt your business from the requirement to pay that 10 weeks of expanded FMLA leave, but you would have to you would have to prove that paying that 10 weeks at a reduced rate would jeopardize your business. In other words, you would basically have to say, if I paid this, my business might, we may go out of business. I think that's going to be hard to prove, and there's a lot more guidance from the Department of Labor on that, like I said, that I could go into specifically one-on-one if that's an issue. As far as clients that I represent that do own a small business, I am advising them to apply for the payroll protection program that is provided through the Small Business Administration. I don't know if anybody's been following that, but that came to be several weeks ago as a result of federal law. It quickly ran out of money. However, this week, Congress has put billions of dollars back into that pipeline. And so if you own a small business, I would encourage people to apply for that. It is used to cover your payroll. It has to be 75%, I believe, paid on payroll, and then 25% could be used towards utilities or rent or mortgage payment or other similar type business expenses. But it has to be that ratio of 75% towards payroll, the goal being to keep people employed and paid. It's a limited window in that it's got to be spent, I believe, in 8 weeks. If you comply with the requirements of that program and use it for payroll and or limited on your other business expenses, the money's basically forgiven and you don't have to pay it back. At this time, you know, I'm telling folks, even if you don't, at this moment, if you don't anticipate needing the money, you may say, well, my business right now is fine. I've not seen a huge drop-off. I don't know that I'm going to need the money. Well, problem is you don't know what next week or next month might look like with your business. So I'm telling people, out of an abundance of caution, apply for it anyway, because to my knowledge, there is not a requirement, at least at this time. Now, it may change. The IRS may issue some more regulations on this, but at this time, it's my understanding that you don't have to verify the actual need in order to get the forgiveness of the loan. That could change. I was reading that as recently as yesterday afternoon, but that's not a requirement now, but it could change. But that's what I've been telling people, to go ahead and apply, if at all possible. Okay, that probably concludes running through the slides and everything that I wanted to get in front of you. I believe there were several questions that were submitted yesterday to me prior to this presentation. I'm going to go through them real quickly and see if I can answer them to the extent I haven't already, and then we'll try to maybe open it up for a few more. The first one was, if my employer has told me to stay home without pay for the next few weeks, am I eligible for unemployment? And I think I addressed that, but the answer is yes, that you've basically been furloughed, and I think you would be eligible for unemployment. Will I be able to take family leave if I am home caring for a family member who is sick? Well, in general, the answer to that is yes, that's true. Under FMLA, you can care for an immediate family member who is sick and be entitled to FMLA. But as we talked about earlier, if it's COVID related, you should get your 80 hours of paid leave and then might qualify for the extended emergency FMLA leave. So you might qualify for that paid leave. Another question, what are my rights if a coworker gets sick with COVID-19 and I am told to go to work anyway? I don't want to run the risk of being infected or expose my family. Well, to my knowledge, there are no additional rights for an employee in that situation. And when I say that, I mean if your office is open, you've been instructed to go to work, they're not under an isolation or quarantine order, then you cannot just sit out. You can't just sit on the sidelines and not go to work. If you do that, you likely will not get paid unless your employer allows you to take some type of personal time off that you've already accrued through your employer, but no federal or state law gives you any rights to just say, I want to sit home. Another question that was received, does health insurance cover the cost of COVID testing? That's probably a long answer, but I'm going to give you a short one. If you're covered under a comprehensive health plan, such as an employer-sponsored plan or an exchange plan that meets the coverage requirements under the Affordable Care Act, then the answer is yes, they will cover the cost of COVID testing. Another one, part-time employees such as servers, dishwashers, bartenders eligible for unemployment, yes, we've covered that. Anybody and everybody that's out of work is probably going to be eligible for unemployment. Do long-term care policies cover caring for a loved one with COVID in the home if they need 24-hour care supervision? Once again, that's probably a longer answer, but the short answer is, A, I think it's going to depend on the terms of the policy and what the policy says about what triggers coverage, but I would think that would be covered under your policy. I mean, I'm not aware of there being a real exclusion for COVID-19. So assuming the condition triggers coverage, I would think that would be covered. Another question, what if I cannot work because I have no child care or cannot afford child care? Once again, we talked about that earlier. If you were utilizing paid child care prior to the pandemic, then you're looking at your leave options under the federal law. If you weren't using paid child care, then that's going to be, you probably will not qualify. Another question about how soon after filing for unemployment will you get it? 2 weeks, direct deposit, or a debit card? And then what if I do not have a permanent address, staying in a shelter? How will I receive benefits? Obviously, the easiest way to do that would be direct deposit. I mean, obviously, you would still qualify. It doesn't matter really where you're living, but direct deposit would be the best way, or you could go the debit card route and maybe have it sent to a P.O. box. All right. So let's see if we can open it up for a few questions, if anybody has any. And I don't even know where I would see that.
I have the question and answer panel up right now. I've got one related to the child care. What if the grandparent who's watching your child doesn't report the child care payments on their tax return? So I'm paying the grandparent to watch my child.
Yeah, I pay my mom $100 a month to watch Johnny, and she doesn't report that. Well, that could get grandmother in trouble with the IRS. I would say, you know, there's, in the guidance that I've read, I haven't seen anything that says what level of proof, what level of documentation do you have to show. So maybe if you're pushed on that, and see, you're going to verify this basically with your employer, okay? So I would say a generic statement that says, I pay Ms. Hunt a certain amount every month. I don't think you have to disclose that amount to watch Johnny, and then have your mother or whoever's watching the child sign that as well. I mean, there's nothing magical about the form, I don't think, because it's my understanding that's then not necessarily submitted to the IRS. You're just verifying that with your employer. So that's how I would handle it if I needed to do that.
Okay. Next question. Thank you for your presentation today. I do Airbnb, which is 1/3 of my total income. I claimed it as rental income last year on taxes. Can I file for unemployment for the loss of that income, or are there other programs that would be better?
So basically, it sounds like this is a question of I'm not being able to rent out my rent property, whether it be Airbnb or otherwise, and so I've lost my income. I've lost that stream of revenue. I've not seen anything that would entitle anybody to claim that as a grounds for unemployment. So that may be one where you may not be entitled to any relief, so to speak. That's not something that I have seen that would be a qualifying reason.
Okay. All right. Next question. I have had to leave work to care for my 93-year-old grandmother who has been doctor ordered to isolate. What benefits am I eligible for? Would I qualify for unemployment or only leave of absence?
I think you would qualify for those 2 federal leave entitlements that we talked about at the beginning. I don't think that would be an unemployment issue, but if in fact they've been ordered to self-isolate under the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act, you're probably under number 4, caring for individuals subject to quarantine, isolation order, or experiencing symptoms. And then I think you would be entitled to that under number 1, Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act.
Okay.
So that 80 hours. I believe that's the answer.
All righty. Any other questions from the audience? Doesn't look like we have any additional questions.
Well, thank you all for this opportunity. I'll be honest with you. You know, this is a complicated area in that it's new. People are kind of, as I said, we're building the airplane as we're flying it. I have a stack of resources on my desk that's probably as thick as a Bible. It's ever changing. It's hard to understand, and then on top of that, you're dealing with everything else that's going on. You're trying to find toilet paper. You're trying to stay healthy. Certainly, if you have any questions or concerns, contact me or any other lawyer in the employment field area, and they may be able to walk you through it. But I hope I've helped. I appreciate the opportunity to be on the call.